Hard work, real talk, no shortcuts. I'm Joseph Cabrera. This is American Operator. All right, team. I'm here with James, Tarrytown Roofing, Kuntz. Really stoked to have you on. Before we're jumping on the show here, we were catching up about a couple things. One, land here in Texas, hunting in Texas. And then also it sounds like you got a cool trip up ahead. So look forward to digging into all those things and kind of getting you reset. But let's do this. I think just for the folks tuning in right now, talk to me about before Tarrytown Roofing. What was, I'm just fascinated with your life of being a cowboy in Mexico and why and how that started. Where does all that come from?
Yeah, so our family has been in the cattle business for a long time, and so they used to own, a bunch of acreage near Eagle Pass, near that ranch that we used to own. They sold that, and they bought a ranch in Mexico, pretty large ranch with, price per acres down there is a little bit cheaper than it is here in Austin. But my grandfather and my dad decided like, hey, let's see if we can get James down there to the ranch and, learn the business. If he wants to plug in and, kind of run it later, great. And if not, no worries. But so I started going down there. I think I was 12 or 13 years old the first time I went down there. So my grandfather was a pilot. My dad's a pilot, and
out of like necessity, or they just love flying, like, or
they just kind of like love flying, and it was convenient, and just kind of one of those cool hobbies that we were kind of talking about. So they picked it up. They had a single engine Cessna plane, nothing crazy, right? But you could fit 3 people and some luggage. So they packed me up. We flew out there. You got to stop on the Eagle Pass side of the border, then Piedras Negras, and then about 30-minute flight into the mountains of Coahuila, and they'd spend like a day with me, and then they dropped me off for, 3 weeks, sometimes up to 3 months. And I'd learn Spanish, learn how to work cattle and chutes, ride horses, all those things, but didn't know a lick of Spanish outside of trips to Acapulco and stuff like that.
At
a
all the baseline.
All the baseline stuff. But we went out there and got to meet the cowboys, and it's like getting along with someone like that with a language barrier, right? It takes, I don't know. I think there's a universal language, right? There's body language, there's stuff like that. But, I really, tried to learn the language, and I tried to connect with these people. I mean, even little things like, we had maids out there that would keep up with the houses and stuff like that, but they would pack me like a different lunch, right? Like kind of in like Mexican China, right? Type stuff, like, fancy stuff. And we're out in the middle of a pasture, 115 degrees. That's no place for that, right? And so the first day they brought me lunch, I was embarrassed, right? And I tried to, bring some over to the other cowboys, and I was like, hey, man, y'all eat on this too, right? And so when that didn't work, right, like that night, I remember I didn't know the language, right? I wrote just kind of, infographic, right, for the mates, right? Like
hieroglyphics and stuff.
Like, hey, I want the same lunch as the cowboys. And so the next day they didn't bring me lunch, and I was eating, kind of what they were eating. And I think that just that first trip I had, like me making that effort that I wasn't, special or separate, right? I was an equal, or I was less than them, right? Because I didn't know the trade yet, right? And I was being a student of the game. I needed to learn from them. I needed mentorship, right? And so I think like just approaching it that way meant a lot. And, I cared about them, right? They were the backbone of the ranch, right? I will get in my other background, like logistics and truck drivers being the backbone of kind of the economy if they stop rolling, right? Like stuff doesn't get on the shelves. But it was just it was a great adventure, right? And I'd come back and I almost forgot how to speak English, right? And I had different mannerisms, and, my skin was a different color, right? And all that stuff. But it was a beautiful place, in a valley surrounded by mountains, and, you're quiet with your thoughts, right? A lot of times you're just, you don't see the other cowboys, right? You're pushing cattle through a pasture, big pastures, and it's hot. And, there's something about just being out there with nature and, with a horse, right? And, kind of just
how old were you when you kicked off all this stuff?
12 or 13, I think, was the first year that I went.
How did they leaving you by yourself for even a day, let alone months? Like, what was the mentality that went there? Like, he'll be fine, or hey,
Yeah.
there's enough people that your folks trust that they're going to look
Yeah.
out after you. Well, how did that?
Yeah, there was enough people that my folks trusted out there, and great people. Some of them I still keep in touch with today.
Yeah.
And it's
I mean, looking back on
it's
it, you ever
wild.
talk to your dad and just go like, was that just kind of like you knew my rite of passage, or my like, what was that, or did he just not think much of it and say like, that's
Yeah,
just
I mean,
life?
it's kind of been a rite of passage, right? I mean, I think it's kind of like I have a shirt that says "Make America Cowboy Again," right? And I like kind of truly believe that, like, you can't be too sensitive to, like, anything these days, and just take the path less traveled, and if it's a little bit more difficult, you're going to grow because of that. And so, I mean, my dad grew up on a ranch, right? The one I was talking about in Brady, Texas, and, building fence and stuff like that. And my grandfather sure as heck does. Like, I've got a picture of him with, two pistols, out in Eagle Pass. And, it's just kind of a rite of passage. You go through hard things in life, and it, hardens you and makes you a better, stronger, more resilient person. And that applies and spills over into business and into life. And that's one thing I feel like I'm very much so very, very resilient person, right? And I'm kind of just waiting for that next challenge.
Yeah. Can you think of a time when you were out there doing the cowboy life? Maybe you didn't appreciate it then, but maybe now you look on it. Is there an experience that stuck out to you that just kind of galvanized the way you think about things or the way you get through stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple, right? There was a Pila, right, off the house, right, and it was spring fed right from the mountains, just a windmill, right. And I remember jumping in that thing after every day, and sun was going down, and cloud of dust would just like come off of me, right. But I remember that feeling of how much cooler and crisper the water was than if I was just going to a chlorinated pool, right, in San Antonio or Austin or Houston, right. And how much sweeter that was, how much sweeter like the mangoes were that we would have for dinner, right?
Yeah.
Like a dessert. And just like all of those little things were that much better because of how hard I worked that day, and how, I don't know, just like it makes you feel a lot more fulfilled, right? You have a purpose, right? Even if it is just, I was getting paid like $25 a day. Can't believe it. And what I spent it on, boots or, whatever, like more work stuff to, chaps, stuff like that. But, yeah. And then we also, I got the opportunity to go hunting, and everyone, if you think of a bear, right? Like now kids think Disney bear, right? And, sweet little animal, right? But in the hunting community, right, we know that, if you're in the livestock business, right, it can, kill your animals, right? And you have to protect the herd and all of that. So we had a 9.5-foot black bear that was out there, killing goats and cattle. And so they said, James, we're taking the day off, and you're gonna go, hunt this black bear. And so we were hunting up at
How old was this, young James?
I was probably like 15 for this one.
So you're old timer then.
Yeah, I was old timer then. So there was a runway, and it was just a rock gravel runway, and we got the rifle out of the closet, and of course it hadn't been touched in 15 years, right? But put up a paint can like up on a fence post and took a 300-yard shot, and it was dialed in.
Really?
It was
You're ready to rock and roll?
Yeah, we were ready to rock and roll. Didn't need to shoot more than one. And we went up to the Ojito and sat there, and we were getting eaten alive by mosquitoes and stuff. And I was like, well, guys, where was the bear, killing all these animals? And they were like, oh, it was down by the pen. I was like, why aren't we by the pen? Like, it's not rocket science here, but let's so
let's go where the honey is.
We got some Modelo's, and we started driving in the truck, and I was like, there it is. And, probably 600-700 yards away, we pulled into some brush, and, I walked up and used something to block its view from me, and got about 300 yards, similar shot. And took the shot, and, out there, you don't waste anything. Not only was it protecting the herd, and, one hell of a story, right? But we actually, we ate it, and that fed the cowboys for a while.
For a while, man.
And, they ate, javelina, and anything, like, you live off the land. And so it was a pretty cool experience all around, for sure. And like, the look in my dad and grandpa's eyes when when they picked me up. Yeah,
They're
when I
proud?
told them, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
they were
imagine,
proud,
man.
for sure.
Yeah, bear, you got to cook well, man, because it's like
You definitely
you got
do.
that trichinosis in there if you don't.
Yep, absolutely.
For folks who don't know what that is, if you
Yeah.
unlike a lot of other meats where you can you can eat it a little more on the rare side, bear you got to eat it almost as well done as jerky as you can get. Otherwise, they got this. This is a bacteria. What is it, like a larva? It's just it's a parasite, I think, that lives in the meat.
Yeah, and
That
it'll
if you
mess you
don't,
up.
it'll mess you up, man. It'll
Yeah.
lay eggs in your muscle tissue and it'll hatch, and
Yeah.
you'll be in pain.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
just cook it well done. But otherwise, I mean,
Yeah, I
it's,
don't think they knew what that was. You know?
I imagine the cowboy, what you call it, like, I imagine those guys probably got a different stomach acid anyways. They'll probably kill anything that comes
they're
into their
tough.
body. They're tough, man.
Yeah.
They look the way I think they would look, just leather, hardened, tough dudes.
Tough dudes.
Yeah.
I mean, the way they would cut on a horse, the way they could lasso. I mean, you go to a rodeo in Houston or San Angelo or you're like, I don't know, these guys they might be able to beat them out on some of this stuff. Like they were,
The Cowboys down in Mexico, really?
Yeah, they were good. They were
I
really
think it's
good.
probably reps, huh? Like this is, and when you're living in those elements, do you think like when you were out there, just kind of knowing? I'm sure today, I have a friend of mine, man. He served in the military with me too, and he we're around there in the same time. And one thing when we do catch up, he'll say something like, "We'll catch up and just do some, small talk and stuff." And usually at the end of it, he's like, "All right, man, like fight the softness, basically, because it's like just general life in a different environment will start to get you used to a different normal."
Yeah.
And so, do you find that those guys do you find that they were born that way, just tough, or do you feel like just being immersed in the elements day in and day out is what ultimately got them to a point?
I think it's the environment.
Yeah.
Right. Now, some of them are second, third generation cowboys, and they had that mentorship like we were talking about, and might have learned faster. But honestly, it's like the people without the background that were kind of either forced into that situation. It was like what they had to figure out and survive and do, and then they took pride in their trade.
Yeah.
But I think it's your environment is what shapes you, right? And it's like what's the saying? I forget who says it. It's like Cody Sanchez. I know she talks about it. It's like choose your hard. And it's hard to be broke, right? And it's also hard to be a cowboy in Mexico, right? But it's like choose your hard. Like one is going to harden you and make you a better, more resilient person. And so, these folks were just as humble as could be, and they didn't get paid that much. But I was a champion to my family to say, hey, we should maybe bonus these guys out at the end of the year if based on certain metrics. And so I was thinking about it from a different perspective. I always made good grades, right? And so I was just trying to like help them out too, because I cared. But and I saw how hard they were working and how much they cared.
Yeah, man. Why do you think they cared so much too? Like why? It seems like they probably were there for a long time, right? Their probably loyalty ran pretty deep, I'd imagine, with those cowboys.
Yeah, and my great uncle, he lived out there too. Spoke Spanish, right? They all respected him. Hal Mangum, and I think that had a lot to do with it, right? We weren't just like some güeros, right? Like we were out there and we cared, and gave them new case knives like every so often, right? And like just the little things. But I think we had kind of lost sight of that for a while, and so me kind of getting plugged back into the ranch, right? I had that opportunity to do those things, but I don't know what it is about land, but you spend enough time on a piece of land, whether it's yours or not, it sure as hell feels like it is, right? And there's some pride, whether it's a lease, right, or a buddy's ranch. Like, I never had friends that would go out to our place and just eat a Snickers, right, and throw the wrapper on the ground, right? Like there's a sense of kind of pride to it, for sure.
I like that, man. Time on Mother Earth gets you to really respect it, whether it's actually yours or not. I can appreciate that, man. Gosh, I can talk to you all day about being a cowboy, man. Maybe this changed the name of the episode here.
Yeah.
What maybe to kind of bridges into business a little bit, like what happened after all that? I imagine many years goes by. You kept being a cowboy, or did something else happen?
Yeah, so ultimately they decided to sell the ranch. So the ranch sold, so couldn't go back, and I didn't know that it was my last trip, right? So it's stuff like that happens in life, but I was just, blessed to have that opportunity.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I finished up high school, played lacrosse, some football, played some golf when I was a kid. Should have kept up with the golf, right? But great in business. But then I graduated Memorial High School in Houston, and then I went to UTSA for a year with some of my closest friends today. And then most of us went to UT Austin.
Did like a transfer?
Yeah, we did the CAP program and transferred. And part of the reason I chose to go to UTSA too was close to the ranches, the one in Eagle Pass and the one in Brady. And I get to spend some time out there hunting, spend more time with my dad, right? And, didn't really want to go back to Houston. I just kind of wanted to go out to the ranches, right? And meet him out there. Something about staring at a campfire, right?
No, that's right. Well, I mean, while you're talking about it, can you describe to folks, and I'm sure you have too.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about you going to Switzerland. We've seen some beautiful places, especially with mountains and rivers and waterways and stuff all over this country, all over this world. What is it about Texas that makes it beautiful, even though it is kind of just this harsh land?
Yeah. So South Texas, right, 12 miles from the border, right, where our ranch was, we'd always be like sitting in a blind, right? And like there was so much like diversity there. So we'd have ducks from all over the country, right? You'd have, like literally every, green heads, teal, right? Pintails, all that kind of stuff. And when you're hunting or taking pictures, right, like you just kind of see all this come in. You're seeing the sunrise, you're seeing the sunset. I don't know. It was just so untouched, though. It wasn't a shot up ranch, right? It was, well taken care of, or just like very just rugged, right?
Yeah.
I mean, very, very rugged. And I don't know. There's just like some beauty to it, like seeing those sunrise and sunsets, and the animals and how they act and operate. Like if they're surviving out there with very minimal water, I mean, there were some stock tanks and stuff, but if those went dry, right, like they wouldn't survive, but they would eat cactus and all sorts of crazy stuff. But certain times of the year when you see it in the spring, right, like the cactus, blossoms, right, bougainvilleas, right, that we had by the house and stuff, and all that stuff's just like super pretty, but it's prickly. It is definitely prickly. So I think it's like when things are hard and it's hot and all of those things, and you go for a swim, right? Like I would go swim in the stock tanks, right? They weren't the cleanest things, but it was what we did, and
way to cool off.
Just kind of made it fun and fun place.
No, I think you captured it well, man. Yeah, that was my experience growing up in South Texas too, where you have, I think it is the harshness that makes it beautiful, because it makes you have to hunt for the beauty. Like it's not given.
Yeah.
But when it's there, man, you notice it. Like it's just like, wow, that sunrise, that mango sky is just really cool today. Or I think you're right about the animals. I'm always surprised, man. I mean, a javelina can survive in a lot of things, but there's some other really nice things like a duck, or even like a beautiful deer that comes through sometimes. And you're like, how is that thing alive out here right now? So, okay, you go to UT Austin, you wrap up there, and then what happens after that?
Yeah, so go to UT Austin. Then I interviewed for, maybe like a couple companies, right? I actually took the first offer that I got. It was for a logistics company. So I went into the office. It was a bunch of young souls, right? Young people too. And, I kind of saw them all on the phone working the deals, and they all had 3 computer screens. And I was like, I've never had more than one, right? And, they were offering me $40,000 base, right? And that's your typical path out of college, right? No matter the grades you make. And so, but there was a commission upside. And I was like, my grandfather, the people I respect, my mentors, right? Like they always said I'd be good at sales. So let's go into sales. So I went into carrier sales, where I'm working with trucking companies, right? They were building out a refrigerated, you're basically just a broker. And I did that for about 2.5 years, did great my first year, comp wise, and then learned a lot. And then something that always stuck with me was like, if you ever stop learning, at a company, right, you either change the role or you change companies, right, or industries, right, if you're not falling in love with it, right? So I decided to go into customer sales. So the CEO of that company, was like, hey, you can, kind of talk the talk. You're educated, right? Like I think you do well on this side, and the carrier side now. So I went into that. Got some really big clients, big names very quickly. Trader Joe's. I was working over Thanksgiving, Christmas, sending trucks into hurricanes and into, LA, delivering chicken broth and stuff like that for Thanksgiving. So just some fun stories. But I had, Trader Joe's as a client, but I also had a deer corn client, right, at El Campo, Texas, right? And so different mode of shipping and stuff like that. But I learned a lot about like, it was kind of dial for dollars, but it was like building relationships. And, I learned a lot about metrics, right? So talk time and dials. And, if you, fill the funnel, right, enough, like something's going to come out the other side. You just got to stay consistent. And, I had the energy and I was healthy then, all that kind of stuff. Right. So, that went well, but I remember having the first truckload for Noodles and Company, and it was a special product that they were shipping in to one of their new stores, grand opening. And we chose a low MC carrier, which means they've been in business for a long time. 60-year-old, like kind of roughly truck driver, right? That's been doing it for a long time. He forgot to turn on the refrigerated unit. So you were basically trying to control a truck driver, right? 1,000 miles away from you. And I felt like I just couldn't, maneuver things like tightly enough, right? To then, but one wrong, shipment, right? In a situation like that. I didn't lose the customer, but I just felt bad enough about it that I was like, hey, like, I don't like being put in these situations where I can't kind of control what I can control.
Yeah.
And, so I ultimately decided to leave, and all my buddies were making hand over fist in tech. So I worked for a UK-based startup in the fintech space, and opened up kind of like their sales team here locally. We did well. It was an expense management application that had a British pound in it. So we're launching it in this market, going to all these conferences. And so, control what you can control. And we sold that product well. It was interesting working with an Australia team and a UK-based team, different cultures, right? We, got to go to the UK for training. And my boss was, I still think to this day, like the best boss I've ever had. But, like the comp wasn't there. Everything's like a stepping stone in my mind. I kind of stopped learning, right? And I wanted to do something a little bit more challenging, and worked for, what I call a financial services company, where they did outsource finance and accounting for private equity-backed software companies. The reason they chose that niche was, what we did was get companies audit ready, exit ready from the jump, right? So we'd either start working with them when they were $5 million in revenue or $100 million in revenue and had an existing accounting function. They just implemented a NetSuite, or, just hired 10 accounting people. And so our play was, hey, we're going to build it in 30 to 90 days, and then we're going to maintain it. So we're basically going to guarantee that it gets done right. But what I saw is what successful businesses were doing, how they were running their sales department, how they were running their accounting team, like how they were looking at things and what that growth trajectory looked like. But I also got to see through our private equity partners that would refer us business, and the ones I had formed relationships with, is how they added value post-acquisition or post-investment. A lot of them were just money, right, on the VC side. But a lot of the good PE firms, they had operating partners that were plugging in and turning on the sales and marketing function. That's the first thing they were touching. They were cleaning that up, increasing conversions, looking at customer acquisition costs to LTV, and they were just optimizing things. But then they were looking at accounting, right? And that's where we kind of solved that problem. But I wasn't passionate about accounting. And I wasn't a business school graduate from UT. It was a minor, right?
What did you study at Texas?
Economics.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So that played into the logistics stuff pretty well. But the regression analysis stuff was interesting to me. Like, what's my probability of success if I do these things? So ultimately, like, that wasn't for me. I left because, I was constantly learning. Like, I was, when I started at that company, I was probably the dumbest person at the company. But like, you raise your bar, right? And you constantly learn. And I was always a student of the game. But it wasn't something I wanted to stick with, right? I was getting paid well. And so I kind of got what I needed to learn there. And then I, where did I go after that? I went to a fintech called Mudflap. So I was selling to truck stops. So it was when diesel fuel was like $9 a gallon, and we had a diesel fuel savings app. And so I would go to these independent truck stops owners, and, we ended up selling, Travel Centers of America, right, onto the platform. But they would offer to give a discount for the fuel, so that they'd say, hey, we'll give $1 off. So what I didn't realize is diesel fuel had these huge margins, not like gasoline. And so I would sell into these truck stops and say, hey, we can get you more gallons, and if we get you more gallons, then we'll that'll get you more in-store sales. And they really don't know where you are. It's hard to reach kind of independent truck drivers, but they make up 90% of trucks on the road. So that was super fun. One of the co-founders there was still is like one of my mentors. And, stayed there, got a piece, still got a piece of that. And hopefully they do great things and, exit and do what they're trying to do, and really good operating team. But that's what I've always been a part of, kind of these private equity, venture capital backed, high growth companies. And, what I always found was consistent is like I would kind of have an idea and we may not implement that idea. It was like, hey, just keep cold calling, right? Or keep sending emails or keep doing it, this way. And, I was very creative. I was an entrepreneur at every one of these places, but that's not what they wanted. And I always wanted to hear the why, right? Why are we doing this thing, right? So that I can get behind it. It just like helps me understand things. And so when I never got that, I'd get frustrated, right? And so, I always did real estate investing while I was in all of these roles just to make, supplemental income. I'd buy lots in East Texas, right? Dig a stock tank, build up a site, someone put a whole mobile home on it, and I'd sell or finance it to someone with, not great credit, but they'd never missed a payment and never have.
Yeah.
And so I'd get creative with stuff like that. But I was at a real estate conference, and at that real estate conference, one of the guys was hiring for a sales leader in the roofing and solar space. And I was like, hey, like I've been doing this real estate investing. This is like a service that all real estate investors need, all homeowners need, commercial property owners. And so like it kind of clicked for me. And so I reached out to him. Took me like 3 attempts to get a hold of this guy, right? But I was consistent and persistent and ended up like building their sales team. It wasn't all what I, shook it up to be like it, but it got me into the space. And I went and worked for one of the largest re-roofing companies in the U.S., private equity backed, a platform, very acquisitive. They just acquired two other companies I just saw. But I was a top sales rep there in my first year in roofing. And I saw what they were doing, and everyone was modeling their companies after them. And all they were doing was door knocking. That was their lead generation strategy, but they hired really well. And then they did a training, right? About a week-long training. And then they had these team leads, like bring these people through the ranks. But it was, looked like a kind of revolving door. But they were the gold standard, right? And so I was like, okay, well, there's a better way to do this, right? Where we have good retention. We were partnering with people, doing what I did at that company with partnering with private equity firms, that seed approach. So we've got property managers, we've got insurance agents, we've got brokers, right? All that type of stuff. And so I saw this opportunity, and about the time when I found out I was going to have my daughter, and a few other things like personal health, I just started feeling better and was investing in myself. Everything kind of all aligned, and I was willing to bet on myself. And when I had that feeling and kind of the idea clicked, I was like, hey, roofing's not rocket science, right? I've basically been running the full process, project managing my own jobs. I'd ordered materials for my jobs in the past. I had been interviewing roofing company owners for about a year now, like a few a week, just to understand what they were doing to differentiate. And there's this huge number of roofing contractors, just like logistics companies. And so it's like, if you can do every little thing well, you can differentiate yourself over time. And that's what we've done. Never looked back after that. I started the LLC. I had a office space, Google my business page up within a day. We move fast. And that's always been my superpower, is compressing time, bias towards urgency, and the business development aspect. And so I'd already built my business over at the previous company through referral partners and things like that. So it wasn't like I had to start from zero and go knock on a bunch of doors. I was selling, our first year in business, right? Like we're putting on commercial roofs because we care about the details, right? And we've removed objections, related to being a newer company, right? By doing a third-party guarantee and partnering with one of those companies. And, I hope licensing comes into play for roofing. And, really just taking care of my people and giving them that attention and listening to them and implementing those ideas that no one ever implemented, right? The ideas that I had, right, at these other companies. And people just want to be heard, right? And that's half of it. And then from there, it's like, hey, this could work. And if not, I wasted a couple grand, right? But let's get smarter about this. Let's build strong partnerships. Let's market, right? That makes sense. Marketing works. And let's try some things, trial and error, because now is the time to test early on, right? And so, yeah, we're doing all those things and shaking it up, but I never thought in a million years that I would be in roofing. Never.
It's funny because the dots always could really like what you just described feels like very well connected.
Yeah.
But it never makes sense like that looking forward,
No.
man. Never. How do you when you put all the pieces together and you go, okay, I'm doing the roofing thing. Was there a moment or something someone told you, or was it just kind of a collection of thoughts that one day you wake up and you go, I'm betting on myself? Because I think for a lot of folks who tune in, that's always where they're at. They're on the fence. You know, they're kind of like, there's a feeling of safety that isn't a real feeling.
Sure.
Well, it's a real feeling, isn't a real reality.
Yeah.
You know, they're actually not safer where they're at.
No.
They think they are, but they're not. And they always have this like, the sign will come, something will happen that'll finally make me jump and go do the thing.
Sure.
Do you remember what made that just go for you?
Yeah. So yeah, it was the announcement of my baby girl coming, right? Who's 5 months old now.
Congrats, man.
It was, I remember where I was, right, when it clicked. I was in my kitchen looking out my window in the backyard, and I was talking to someone, and he called me stupid. He was like, hey man, like you're a smart guy, but you are being stupid right now. Like you're doing all of this stuff. Like you need to do it for yourself and do it for, others. And what I looked at was the time I was spending as a sales rep, because I was doing this full cycle sales, and I was having to drive there and back for these adjuster meetings and these inspections, and I was doing residential. My whole background's B2B. And there wasn't an opportunity to sell commercial there. There wasn't an opportunity to do repairs and build relationships, and it wasn't the right setting. And I was like, yeah, man, you're right. I was like, I listened. And then, also I was seeing this functional doctor out of Frisco, and been seeing him for about 2 weeks, and I had never been more clear-headed than, in my, teenage years, right? And so I was just willing to bet on myself. I was like, I have the energy, right? I have the confidence. It's not just for me now, right? It's for my family. So it was kind of all of those things aligned. And I think it was that night I like registered the business and, went to Zen Business, or I forget what it's called now, but just went through the steps. And I had done it for my real estate company. So I knew a marketing person. I also had a consultant that, I don't know everything, right? And I bring in people smarter than me, right? In those particular areas. I don't have an ego, I like to think. And, I bring in that expertise, right? I'm not the best estimator, right? I'm not the best closer, right? I'm good at business development and, kind of, I think, sharing the vision and things like that, and then getting the implementers to come in and integrate things. But I think it's, just like having that kind of backdrop as well as like that consultant of like, hey, if you don't know something, right? Hey, I got a bookkeeper, right? Like we can help you, like business in a box. And there's a lot of people out there that will do it for kind of a fair price. And there's a lot of people that are out there to take advantage of you. And I think it's knowing the difference between, those and having some of it figured out, but you don't need all of it figured out. Otherwise you just won't do it. And, it's like, action beats fear every time. And I just took that first step, and that was it.
It's, though not having it all figured out, I think that's such an unlock, man. There's, if I could tell the number of folks out there who are trying to like put together the perfect plan, that even if you had, let's just say you had the ability to come up with a perfect plan.
Yeah.
You only have about 3% of the actual plan put together.
Yeah.
Because when you get into it, I mean, heck, man, everything from unexpected expenses, people, regulatory stuff, things going on with the city you're working in, family, those things are inputs that a lot of folks have no ability to factor in.
Yeah.
And they're solving for this target that doesn't even, there's no finish line on that decision. And so to you, I mean, what I hear you saying is like, I'm really kind of trusting that intuition, that experience that you've had kind of over the years to be able to land on it. Have you had any moments of regret since making that decision?
Well, I think, you take steps back, right, before you take steps forward. And I've always understood that about the process. That I remember telling my wife when I got in the roofing space, I was like, hey, I'm no longer making this, per year, right? And, it's not like I had a bunch, ton of money saved up, right? I had some, wasn't in the best, financial position to like kind of take that risk, even when I got in the space before I started my company. And, I think it's just like, you just got to take the step. Like it doesn't all have to well, it doesn't have to be like laid out right in front of you, right? And so, you know, knowing that you have to take steps back to take steps forward, right? That you have to learn and be a student of the game, and that it's all going to be worth it. But like, I think what you said earlier, right, is like being an employee, right, for the wrong, you know, organization. I like to think we have the right organization if you know, do the work, right? That's just, got to do the work and be a student of the game. It's risky, right? Like you can get laid off at any point in time, right? Like if I'm looking at from a risk perspective, if I'm, you know, signing in a, you know, a lease for an apartment, right, and I'm a landlord, I'd rather, you know, go with the person that owns the company, right? Because there is no guarantee for tomorrow that they're going to get a paycheck, you know, the person that's the employee. I think we're seeing a lot of that now, and I didn't want to be subject to that risk, you know, so took the step.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Good on you. Where's the, how did you land on the name Tarrytown Roofing?
Yeah, you know, it's like I remember where we were brainstorming the idea too, and you know, we're in Columbus, Texas, and you know, I had some ideas and stuff like that. My sister lives in Tarrytown. I live in Northwest Hills. Our office is in Tarrytown, but before we had decided on the office, right? It's like, you know, how do we say, you know, our company is quality, that we come from a place of experience, and we come, you know, that we're service focused, right? And you know, we were thinking like Blue Label, Black Label, like something like that. It was the name of Black Label, the name of the consultant. And that kind of was a way to say, well, what's an affluent neighborhood that's close by? And let's be 5 Mile famous. Let's start there. And obviously the properties in Tarrytown are worth a little bit more. It's a different type of clientele. I like to see I'm a different, you know, type of roofer, and we're hiring, you know, bringing people in that are different, not necessarily from the industry, that might have been in enterprise tech sales and can sell on a different level and be very consultative. And business owners appreciate that. A lot of business owners live in Tarrytown, right? If we, you know, tap into that market, well, they have commercial properties likely, right? Or they're a C-level executive for another organization. Like that is our type of ICP. And so without actually drawing out like a full-blown business plan of our ICP, I was just like, okay, that's it, right? Let's check and see if it's taken. I thought for sure 99% chance Tarrytown Roofing's taken. It wasn't taken. I'd heard of Tarrytown Turf. I think it was my sister's idea. I think she was the one that like landed on it, and I was like, okay, yep, that's it.
Just felt right.
It just felt right immediately. And we had gone through maybe 1,000 names, and I think the wine, you know, helped everyone out with the creativity.
When we found each other, when I heard your name, the reason I don't actually ask every owner that question. Because I think it's a great name, and it's because I didn't know the story behind it, but I had to imagine that there was something along those lines. Mm-hmm. And especially here, I mean, every major city has that neighborhood that everybody is kind of the gold standard, if you will. You know, and even I was saying a story the other day, and I was like, oh man, I was in this part of the world, and this was basically it was like the Tarrytown part of that world. And people in this town knew what I was saying, you know, just by saying that. But that's interesting. I never thought about, I didn't go as far to go like, oh yeah, there's business owners there too who live in that town who can also kind of help you with that. What is the biggest difference in residential and commercial? Is it just size, or do you find that actually the work is also just much more comprehensive?
So I would say that, so in new construction, right, you have to be able to read plans, and like working with the GC is a lot different than working like an insurance claim for, you know, an apartment, right? Mm-hmm. And there's small commercial stuff and there's large commercial stuff, but you know, it's like kind of the same consultative sell, right? Policies are different in residential to commercial. There's, you know, you need to understand that. The prep work certainly is. You're off by 5%. That's a lot on a big commercial job. So it's like more attention to the detail, but we're already very attention to the detail, even on the small stuff, right? And, you know, you have to have equipment there if it's a high rise, right? Crane, right? If you're, you know, an apartment complex, boom lifts, scissor lifts, right? Stuff like that. You have to think about people stealing your materials, right? And dropping materials maybe every 2 days and dropping it just right at the beginning. Working with your suppliers on that. You got to coordinate, you know, if it's an apartment complex, tenants, so that you don't drop shingles on their roof. And so got to pay attention to parking, make sure that there's a tow truck available if someone just didn't get all the notices and communication that went out. You got to think of, you know, what if a nail drops and we don't find it, right? And it, give someone a flat tire, right? Well, let's make sure we take care of that person. We got a plan process for that. But yeah, just, if you're talking insurance claims, like, getting that roof approved, insurance companies aren't just ready to strike a, $1 million check, right? Yeah. You've got to really work with the insurance adjuster, right? Show them all the code language, right? This is why, like, y'all need to kind of, take care of the client on this. And you're working with multiple decision makers, right? So I was used to it, enterprise sales, right? I was selling to, 6, 7 people sometimes, and 8-step sales process. And I think it's, the difference is the follow-up, right? Like maybe 4% of people, in the commercial space need a roof that year. Well, what are you doing with the other 96%?
Better keep them warm, right?
Keep them warm, follow up, maintenance and service, preventative maintenance, right? Think of like a bumper-to-bumper warranty on a truck. You only keep that if you change the oil, right? And you do the maintenance. If you don't do that, it voids the warranty. A lot of people don't know that in roofing. So offering something to everyone's a potential client, and then, build a relationship with. And, what we can do is we can take those roofs off the street, right? We can now, like, we've walked that roof, we know that roof. If something happens, we've got that information plugged into our hail detection and, wind detection software, and we can be proactive. Hey, we normally walk this roof every 6 months. We need to get on this and check it. And, we can have them meet with their insurance agent, or if they don't know or like them, we can introduce them to one of our partners and they can review their policy, right? We're not policy experts. Yeah. So that if something does happen in the future, they're covered, but at least we can control what we can control, right? And extend the life of their roof by doing maintenance to it and being more proactive than reactive. But yeah, I mean, that's a long answer to, how it's different. But I think also the people that, are equipped to sell a commercial job, it's a lot different. It's a lot less transactional, and takes a little bit more prep work, right? Going into it.
Yeah, there's a lot more eyeballs looking at it. No, yeah. I think those are the things that sounds like your experience probably working in the industry first gave you an insight into. If you were to walk in cold, I'm going to start roofing.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't have thought about 70% of the things you just mentioned. Yeah. Just having those thoughts about materials even, and when you drop, which I imagine even your trucking experience. These are all the kinds of things that I think sometimes you look at it, and I think about folks that come through and they're looking at getting into an industry or getting into a thing, and they don't often think that, like, even the smallest thing they learn and experience before can really help them in this current endeavor. I think you just got to kind of figure out how, and just being scrappy about those things. Yeah, I mean, killer. I mean, so what's the daydream about Tarrytown Roofing? Is it just kind of being the biggest name here in town, or if you fast forward 5 years from now, what's it look like?
Yeah, I think, really, I mean, it wasn't just about like changing my life or my family's life and like building legacy and, all the typical things, right? It was getting my time back, right? And, I can't do all of these things, right? And, make the money I wanted to make, right? And like, there wasn't a company that had done it. And so I was like, I wanted to change the norm and raise the bar and the standard. But I also wanted to like create an environment where people could thrive and they felt heard and respected, and they could make, life-changing money, right? And so like 5 years from now, we're not here to be small. So kind of the strategy of Tarrytown Roofing, right? Like, we are going to acquire in other markets through relationships with attorneys and things like that. And through my seller financing and real estate background, right? You can acquire companies through seller financing. So it doesn't take a lot of capital, right? Their alternative might be to spend 50 grand, 100 grand to close down a business. What if we acquire that phone number, right? And port it over, and we now start servicing those clients, right? If they don't want to go through the paperwork and stuff like that, we'll pay you 5 grand for your phone number. So there's strategies that we have. And so like the Woodlands Roofing, or it might be River Oaks Roofing, or we'll see which ones are taken and which ones aren't. But we're going to grow and scale organically. We're currently rolling out like SOPs, and it's big in one of the companies I worked with. You had to, and otherwise stuff falls through the cracks.
A lot of moving pieces.
Yeah, and like if you don't have a playbook for the critical tasks, like you make big mistakes, and you don't grow either. You grow through mistakes or through mentorship, right? And that's part of how I've been able to do this as quickly as I have, is through mentorship. By setting that ego aside and asking the dumb questions, because I'd rather be dumb now, right, than be dumb later, right, and constantly raising the bar. So Yeah, the goal is north of 100 million from a revenue perspective in less than 5 years. Kind of the gold standard was to do that in about 10. I think we can do it faster, and I think we can do it better with less stuff breaking organically and through acquisition. And then, but it's a lot to do, right? It's drinking from the fire hose every single day to hit that timeline, right? And we want the production to obviously be ahead of the sales, right? And we don't ever want to like install because it costs you a lot, right? To make those kind of mistakes. And so it's, doing it at the right pace, but doing it at the pace that, we're like, fast enough, right?
Yeah.
So.
This sounds like not only a big goal to hit that would probably make, be life-changing, I'm sure, but one that's got a lot of good, sounds like a lot of exciting waypoints along the way, man. So before we close that, I want to dig into some of the, I would say directly unrelated, but in some ways, I think it's probably the layer that goes between everything. We talked about health, keeping your brain clear, all those type of things. You're headed out to the mountains over there in Switzerland for a reason. Talk to me about just like why that's important to you, maybe personally and also from a business perspective.
Yeah, I tell my wife, I forget where I heard it, but it's, I'll take care of me for you if you take care of you for me. And I think that's huge, right? Without your health, without your mental clarity, right, you're going to make worse decisions. It's going to take you longer to make decisions, right? It's going to completely change the trajectory of your life. And what I had backwards early on was I was investing in all these like business courses and real estate investing, and I'm glad I did. And like, it's great experience, right? And it's led to a lot of the stuff we're implementing right now. But I should have, quit drinking earlier, right? I should have, ate healthier earlier, right? Done all these things, but I'm still young. I'm 34, right? I've got my life ahead of me, and I can change what happens moving forward, right? And part of that is balancing, the health aspect with the business and, all of that. And, I'm going out to Swiss Mountain Clinic in Switzerland. So I'm flying into Milan, and I'm doing 7 days of treatment, stuff that you can't get done in the States, right? Stuff that actually truly heals you, right? And I was referred by a friend. I met them at, one of these like kind of functional health places in Austin. And they said they were having some issues. She was in her 40s, and she got back and she was like, I feel like I'm in my 20s again. And it stuck with her for, last I checked, it's been 2 months since she went. And I was like, I'm sold. So I'm going there for some treatments. There's no Wi-Fi. That's
a treatment alone.
Yeah, that's a treatment alone, right? Like a lot of people these days, they turn their Wi-Fi off at night. We can't do that right now because the baby monitor and stuff. But
makes sense.
But just that, and they're just like unplugging, looking at the the mountains, right? Doing those treatments to help you, and then I'm gonna come back and like I just know I'm gonna be a different person, right? And I think mindset's a lot of it too, right? I think there's things that people can do that are cheaper, right? You can meditate. I truly believe that can change kind of your stars, right? You can do stuff that's a lot cheaper than what we're doing here in Switzerland, but it's basically the same price as a trip to Europe. It just happens to include all these treatments. Like the actual lodging for the nicest room there was like $2,000 for a week. That's pretty good deal.
So that's gonna be. I mean, so you're gonna come back ready to. You're gonna be a whole new man when you get back this way, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is a thing that it's a completely underestimated or maybe understated thing is the health of the owner or the person at the helm. I often think about the role that is the boss, the leader, the captain of the ship, the owner, the operator. One of the things you get, one of the best ways or one of the most important ways you earn your living is being able to think clearly for your team. Like you're the thinker on the team. And one of the things that we all know intuitively is that the body, there's kind of maybe arguments both ways, but I genuinely believe that like that body and mind work in unison. One of the things I picked up from the service, I don't think it was by accident that we used to, every day, the first thing we all did together was work out together. Yeah. And sure, there's a bit of an occupational reason for doing that, but also it just gets things rolling. I think I'm convinced this is why we could probably get done by 10 a.m. what most people try to do all day long.
Yeah.
And it's because like you're fresh and you're locked in and there's kind of this mojo going that's hard to put a finger on.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something that I will hear over and over again. Folks go, I just don't have time for it. And I'm like, man, what you're really saying is you don't want to run your business well.
Yeah.
And it says what you're really thinking of. So I'm saying all to say I'm stoked for you. And I have no idea what you're about to go do. I mean, other than like, for me, you just put me in the mountains climbing around. And I think you're already reset.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're about to go pour some nitro on top of
Absolutely. Absolutely. Love to compress time. Love to, kind of just do things a little bit different. And I mean, like you're kind of saying, right? It's like choose your hard. You go back to like the military stuff. I forget which podcast I heard it on, right? But it's like it wasn't that people like chose based on like, who their teammates were, based on like performance or their ability to do that job well, but it was like, who did they trust the most, right? And it's like part of what we're doing here is like building a strong team that has a similar mindset, that cares about their health, that's constantly making each other better, and we trust each other to like take care of stuff so that we can go on a vacation, right? That we can turn our brains off, right? And not have to check the emails and know that it'll be handled. But it's a constant work in progress, right? We just keep raising the bar, and I think we're further ahead than most of these companies that have been around for decades.
Yeah. Do you have is there a certain trait of the people you're bringing onto the team that you try to look for, or at least something common?
Just like constant improvement. Like they want to get better. They're not just looking for a job, right? There's a lot of good talent out there right now in the market. There's a lot of people that are unhappy with their job, or bubbles popping, right? Kind of in the tech industry. And so, we want to find people that can sell at that higher level and just be honest with folks, right? Like that's all we want. Like I've read every sales book, like kind of there is, and I don't use a lot of it, right? Because a lot of it's like getting people to make a decision that they don't, actually need to make, right, for your product or service. And it's like, no, I want them to like be super confident in that decision. We've provided so many options, given them so much information for them to make that educated decision. And so it's like they need to be able to do that, right, at a consultative level, right? But what I'm doing is I'm finding people and I'm understanding what they like doing and what they're good at, right? And finding that intersection. And not everyone's like a unicorn, right? That's great at business development. That's great at, doing roof inspections. That's great at project managing a job. Those are different things, right? You've got builders, you've got maintainers, right? And you've got people that have their different strengths and weaknesses, right? And so let's put, everyone's strengths together and have that work like a cog in a wheel. And, I think, as long as they're willing to, improve on themselves every day and constantly learn, right? Like they're meant for us. Sometimes, we don't figure out that the right person till, a few weeks in, and, it doesn't work out, but we're trying to minimize that. And just do a little bit more legwork on the front end to make sure that they're the right fit. But I feel like we're just attracting that person, right? I'm not like, it's not like a bunch of Indeed stuff. It's just like referrals through friends, and they follow you on social media and they know what kind of person you are, and they just, hey, you need to talk to James, and, I think y'all could do something.
Yeah. You find that the stuff that I think we dismiss oftentimes during an interview process or bringing on teammates is like looking for the things that you can't teach.
Yeah.
It's that stuff that, if I hear like, oh man, James, like his dad made him do Cowboy stuff at 12. Like that tells me a whole lot more than your ability to go put nails on a roof somewhere, right? I just like know way more about you. Like I'm convinced you'll figure out the nails on a roof. Like even if you aren't the best roofer in the world, I'm convinced you'll figure it out.
Absolutely.
But if you're a great roofer, I'm not completely convinced right away that like, can you endure and be creative if something happens in the field, or like what can you do when the going gets tough? That I have no idea on, but that's, I think that's stuff that we lean on, man. Well, before we close out, like for folks who are kind of in, or maybe a year ago where you were sitting, any advice you'd give them for maybe those on the fence right now, thinking about jumping into this life that is owning your own path in a good way? You got a lot of independence potentially and creation you're doing for your family, but also there's also a lot of responsibility with it. Any advice you'd give folks who are considering it?
Yeah, I would say work on yourself, and then what I mean by that, right, is like go see some functional doctors, right, like some chiropractors that do some kind of woo-woo stuff, right, and just go like explore that world a little bit. Find clean water to drink, right, switch up your diet, like, eat whole foods, and see how you feel after a week, right, and drinking's also a thing that you can cut out of your life and replace with other things, because you're going to have more time and energy and stuff like that. But you don't have to go that far, right? I decided to do that. And I think it's like interview people that are in the business already and understand what you're getting yourself into, because like once you start something, like see it through. Like I'm not just gonna call it quits and because we had a hard day, or it rained in the roof, or something like that. No, it's like, no, we're working through the punches, but I want to learn as much as possible beforehand to de-risk this entire process. So figure out what you're good at, and then offer something to some of these other owners, right? If you're getting in the HVAC space or the plumbing space, right, like just interview some of those. You'd be super surprised how many people are willing to have a conversation, or get taken out to lunch, or just hop on a quick call, and then have those powerful questions, and then share insights with them. Don't look at these people as like future competition. They still have to implement it, and they're going to share some nuggets with you. You're going to share some nuggets with them. Hey, I've been doing some research. I watched this YouTube video. I'm not in the space yet, but this is what I found. Have you tried that?
Yeah.
And if you think of things a little bit differently, like they'll honor that and respect that. And you keep a list of, the owners that, gave you some nuggets and had an abundance mindset, right, and all of that, and you're getting there faster through mentorship, and you're not even paying for it.
Yeah, so much wisdom in that statement, man. James, thanks for coming on, brother.
Yeah,
and I'm glad you're here in town, because now I'm going to keep an eye out, and maybe if I'm always up for a field trip where I get to go see y'all doing what you do in real life, so maybe we can get something set up where we kind of get in the field, man. But more power to you, man. Congrats on the new on the new family member, and I hope whatever you're going to go look for in the mountains, man, you go find it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the American Operator Podcast, where we celebrate the backbone of America, small business owners and operators like you. If you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe so you'll never miss out on more of these stories and insights from people who keep our community strong. Until next time, keep building, keep operating, and keep America moving forward.